When I went to Villa Massimo as a scholarship holder in 2003, friends asked me with a grin, does it still make sense today? Stay in Rome, in the old tradition of the Grand Tour. This, since the Renaissance, obligatory educational trip for the sons of the European mobility, later also of the upper middle class. Today financed by the German government and accessible to anyone who makes it through the eye of the needle of the committees. I don't know why I immediately thought of this book. I remembered seeing it on my parents' table as a child. Was it that magic that emanated from the red lettering Club of Rome that burned it into my childhood memory, or was it rather the horrific photo? It was only much later that I learned that at that time a team of researchers from the MIT made precise predictions about the developments of the globally intertwined problems of industrialization, population increase, and shortage of raw materials. They said that we humans will experience a collapse. New research shows we are on schedule. A Villa Massimo scholar, the writer Rolf-Dieter Brinkmann, who was here during that time, did something very important, in my opinion. Besides sitting here, ranting about the dying city, drinking wine from canisters, he devoted himself to his so-called volumes of materiality. In them, he meticulously observed every detail. Here's an example of the Villa Massimo itself. What we no longer see, he shows us as if he had never seen it. This can be a model, to look at things as if we've never seen them before. Unbiased and unencumbered by the conventional. Have you heard about this book, Fate of Rome, by Kylie Harper? Usually, the fall of the Roman Empire is attributed to the rampant decadence of society. This book instead explores the role that climate change and infectious disease played an important role in that collapse. It becomes a story of nature's triumph over human ambition. In the discussion of architecture and the city, wouldn't their relationship to ecology be pushed to the forefront? What's the opposite of the fragment? The whole? Isn't a whole in the history of the city always created from the coming together of a multitude of components, an addition of migrants, an abandonment of sites and overgrowth, just as in nature itself? A whole through interaction of countless changing factors? I would like to talk about a building that I consider a fragment and give a definition of what I mean with that. It's about Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's design for the new Nationalgalerie in Berlin. More or less parallel to the first predictions of the Club of Rome about the disaster of mankind. I was inspired by this book, The Open Work by Umberto Eco. He writes there, art, at least since Romanticism, is to be regarded as unfinished. The fragment becomes the program. He further writes, the artistic fragment completes itself only at the moment it is contemplated. In such an understanding, is such an understanding transferable to an architectural object? For this purpose, I examined the pavilion, which was designed for temporary exhibitions. The area underneath, holding the permanent collection, offers its roof as a public space. On this collage, you can see how the building is conceived. It is not the architectural elements, the walls and the columns, that delimit the space, but the artworks themselves. Instead, this place is limited, if one can say so at all, by the water surface and the green areas, thus by its environment itself. Floor and ceiling do not appear at all. It is not clear where this building begins and where it ends. On one side, you could say it starts where the glass encompasses the interior. But at the same time, there's this cantilevered roof, so you could also say that the interior ends there. On the other hand, the terrace is covered with the same stone and formant as the glazed internal area of the building, so the building does not end there at all, but interlocks with the urban space and becomes even an urban space, as seen in the installation by Anne Veronica Janssen, or in this space, not an interior after all, as here with carpet and crystal chandelier in the staging aber auch Salon by Rudolf Stingel. Such an architectural fragment obviously possesses the layout to transport no clear certificates with fixed meanings. If you look at this architecture with a little distance, you could say, well, it's just a box. Mies himself once said it in his humorous way, golly, make the box big enough for people to walk back and forth in it. Sure, it's a box. Is it? That's how Koolhaas did it. But you can also see this architecture as a stage. In this exhibition, the idea of stage is reinforced by the addition of a circus ring. The curtains, almost never used, are drawn and resembled a tent, and the spectators are seated in an amphitheater. You can also discover a temple, so a building that serves as a sanctuary for art then. The proportion, the free position of the building, the precise of the pedestal, the presence of the pedestal, the large staircase, all indications that makes this thesis strong as well. At the latest, after the publication of Fritz Neumeyer's Mies van der Rohe, The Artless World. This fragment is read, depending on what the viewer brings with him in terms of background knowledge, his own cultural imprint, his horizon. Its identity is specified by its respective use. In other words, through what is brought into it in terms of exhibition program, internal orders and objects, and what the visitor adds to it. Obviously, the accessibility of this building is of high priority. That is interesting. It has to offer spatial, technological, and content reference systems. We can say that it is spatially open due to the reduction of its architectural elements and the expansion of its spatial boundaries. It's typological open due to its capacity to integrate ideas and content especially well. This fragmentary nature of this space is thus not solely at the level of form and content, but it is also realized through the co-creation of the user. Its fragmented architecture can realize a state that is already prepared as an option. On the functional level, for example, the floor and ceiling are designed in such a way that they provide a supply for infrastructure, lighting, hangings, fixtures, electrical outlets. At the same time, all architectural elements of the space are also prepared theoretical conceptual levels. We humans can give different meanings to such a building type. Conversely, such a building, in the context given to it, sets the parameters within which meanings can unfold. The key role is played by the viewer and user. It is interactionist behavior seen in this way. It is not reaction, but it is an interaction. It's an architectural fragment between social science, environmental planning, and aesthetics. After centuries of colonization and expansion, we have overrun the world with our architecture. What if we were to reverse that expansion? For this reason, we have to re-look at questions of density. A little example. The current population in Berlin, for example, is around 3.5 million at the moment, and its built-up area is 37,000 hectares. What if the city of Berlin would be developed into a hyper-dense metropolis and its surrounding areas into a well-functioning, interlocking ecosystem? The legally defined minimum of housing space for human beings in Germany is 12 square meters, corridors and stairs included. So the minimum volume in total for their housing space would be 200 million cubic meters. If it becomes a cube, each side would measure 560 meters. But this is just a mind game. How could the coexistence of urbanity and natural space look like? This is a project about urban expansion along an existing highway. On the left, you see wildlife corridors in Germany and their neighboring countries. Next to this, there's our human infrastructure networks, highways and railway roads. And on the right, there's a project, Hypercity. This project is an urban model that increases the natural space necessary for a healthy ecosystem to 50% by attaching urbanity to existing infrastructures. If we talk about the monumentality of fragments, is it also allowed to talk about the monumentality of interlocking ecosystems? the equality of animals, pedestrians, and intermobility users? What if we would use urban voids, for example, the old airport, Tempelhof in Berlin, and involve it into a nature reserve, an area within the city from which humans would initially step back completely? It could be the venue for the next International Building Exhibition, IBA, combined with an horticultural show, IGA. Why is it taken for granted that we simply declare the ground, the soil, to be our property? To end with a book with the title Beginning. I was just given it by a friend. It came out 3 weeks ago. The authors there asked how our civilization can be rethought with the future of humanity in mind. It's a plea for the power of direct action. I can't wait to read it. Thank you very much.